Paper Mario, a series full of controversy and criticism, a series that is highly divided with opinion. Ever since the release of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, all the way back in 2004 for Nintendo GameCube, the majority of the fanbase were hoping that the future entries of the series would reach the same standard of that title. The Wii, 3DS and Wii U entries weren't worthy enough to be classed as a true successor to The Thousand Year Door by majority of the Paper Mario community. The future looked bleak for the series, especially after the failure of the Wii U title Colour Splash, until finally some light started to shine through the paper in the form of an article from the Video Games Chronicle on March 31st, stating, Nintendo is preparing to announce a new installment in the Paper Mario series. The new game is understood to return to the series' RPG roots with a game closer to its N64 and GameCube installments. 44 days later, on May 14th, Nintendo finally announced this new entry to the series. How did they announce this? On Nintendo Direct? What about a mini Direct? Could have been a Mario Direct. Nope, just a casual Twitter announcement that only gave us a 2-month window. Today, I'm going to be submerging myself into this new installment that is all folded and cut up in the shape of Paper Mario, the Origami King. As always, I'll be giving my honest opinion, especially when it's the first time I've played for a Paper Mario game. Therefore, let's start cutting this game up into tiny pieces with our review scissors and jump right into it. Also, I do apologise for the paper puns, I just can't resist. The most fundamental part of a video game is its story. It's the thing that keeps us hooked and intrigued to continue and see the events that proceed throughout the game. The Origami King starts off in the typical Mario fashion. Mario and Luigi have been invited by Princess Peach to the Origami Festival, which is taking place in Toad Town, a location that resides near Princess Peach's castle. Once they arrive, they immediately notice that something is off, as no one is around. This is where the game goes quite reasonably dark for Nintendo, and you begin to get asked questions like silencing toads, or being creased and reborn as origami. When I saw this on the trailer, it immediately got me intrigued into what direction Nintendo was pushing the Paper Mario series towards. And this trend had continued throughout the start of the game, as you have to witness paper characters being forced into origami. Once this happens, you'll then be introduced to one of the protagonists and antagonists of the game, Olivia and Ollie respectively. What's Ollie's master plan? To simply make everyone into origami. But why? This is when the story really begins to get crumbled up and torn in half. Because after this encounter, you only really have one main objective, removing each strimmer that is currently protecting Princess Peach's castle. In my honest opinion, the story for this game started off really well, and they executed it in such a way that makes you want to keep playing. But after that initial boost, they haven't kept that energy consistently going for the rest of the game, which is really disappointing as there are still some parts throughout that are really engaging and funny. One thing that doesn't disappoint though is the dialogue. It's very cheerful and entertaining. Even though this game is clearly aimed for younger audiences, I have to be honest and say I've had a good laugh reading the dialogue throughout the game. I'm someone who normally doesn't pay too much detail to any text that really doesn't have any significance to the story, but this game is an exception, as I always have to read what each character says, even if they aren't important to the story. This refreshing, entertaining and cutting edge humour take to the dialogue is the only thing that keeps the lacklustre story together like a paperclip. I really have to praise the Paper Mario art team for the stunning visuals that they have provided for Origami King. The graphics on this game are definitely one of the selling points to consider when deciding to purchase this detailed and care-filled title, because the characters and settings are really detailed. You can honestly see all the effort and love that the team has put into this title through the creative methods they have used to make everything fresh and feel like it all folds and shapes into the world perfectly. Speaking of design, I think we do have to talk about one negative, and that's the character design. The day before the game's release, on July 17th, Video Games Chronicle released an interview with Origami King's producer, where he says this about character design. Since Paper Mario Sticker Star, it's no longer possible to modify Mario characters or to create original characters that touch on the Mario universe. That means that if we aren't using Mario characters for bosses, we need to create original characters with designs that don't involve the Mario universe at all, like we've done with Ollie and the stationary bosses. This creative decision by Nintendo to restrict intelligent systems from being able to modify and create original characters within the Mario universe can only mean one thing. Oh no. Toads. Toads are everywhere. Instead of giving them the freedom to be able to express and create their own characters like they did in Paper Mario, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario, they now have to stick to already existing enemies and to not change or add anything into the Mario universe. Therefore, this means that the only characters you're going to interact with are your generic toads. Toads are admittedly also important if you want to 100% the game, because you need to save every toad possible that has been folded up. That flower, toad. In that bin, toad. That bug, you guessed it, toad. I'm surprised they didn't call this Paper Mario the Origami origami toad with how many you discover throughout your adventure. However, there is some good with the toads. They do bring out some admittedly entertaining dialogue that does give me the occasional chuckle, while also giving out some helpful tips and reminders to remind you about the controls and anything important. After all that toad talk, I think it's time to move on to the world design. Nintendo has made sure that each and every area isn't paper thin, but in fact made sure they are both refreshing and completely unique from one another. Whether it's a mixture of both nostalgia and new feelings as you walk within a folded up Princess Peach's castle, or exploring lands such as Toad Town or Shogun Studios, each location is crafted differently to each other, which makes them easily recognisable from one another, which is very handy. Honestly, it's really creative seeing all these different themes and ideas that the team put together into making each world its own. Another thing that I like is how jam-packed they have stapled hidden locations within each area as you explore, forcing you to keep a sharp eye on things and making you make sure to check every crease that there is to see and explore. This, unlike admittedly the story, is one of the few reasons I feel that has kept me hooked into the game, as trying to locate and find all these scattered secret areas within each map can be time consuming and will test your exploring abilities, which is something I actually appreciate, as I do love to explore. Finally, the last thing I appreciate is all the method travel that you can use in the game. You can simply walk through the lands, or sail by sea with the assistance of a toad, or even have your own vessel and control it when you get to travel on the Great Sea. When I first discovered that I was actually in control and could dictate where I could sail, I immediately got Wind Waker vibes. All of these design choices really does make Paper Mario the Origami King an amazing adventure game that leaves you amazed with all the new gimmicks and entertaining dialogue that the game has to offer. It isn't just adventure and dialogue that makes the game enjoyable. Music is another positive that needs to be praised and credited towards the composers, because each and every piece has been composed brilliantly. I genuinely love listening to the soundtracks in every area, and it's amazing how they have managed to make each zone completely unique from one another, because music is one of the main characteristics that can make a good game into a brilliant one. This is due to the fact if you have a game with an amazing soundtrack, then that alone can help reminisce your experience playing through the game. Although the music is good in Origami King, it's worth noting that I don't really fully remember a single track from the game, aside from a remixed version of the underground theme from Super Mario Bros. All the way back on the NES in 1985. I will play both versions now. The fact that they've been able to twist such a classical piece of video game music into its own special remix and make it blend with the overall aesthetic of the game just shows, like the artists, how much care and effort the composers went into producing music, because while I wouldn't be able to remember a track from the top of my head, I feel like I could easily recognise a piece from the soundtrack if someone played it. That just shows the fantastic job the musicians have done. One of the most interesting things that I love about the gameplay is the puzzles. All the puzzles that you have to solve have been integrated brilliantly as part of the environment, and each one has been really well thought out. An example of a puzzle that springs onto mind is the one within the Water of Elemental Shrine, where you need to find the missing part to help complete the circuit, so the water is able to successfully flow from one location to another. I personally enjoy the puzzles as each one is refreshing and new, and it helps bring a balance with the adventure side of the game, because by having these puzzles placed where they are, it helps you relax and settles the pace just. Nothing too slow, but nothing too fast either. The interactivity with the puzzles is handy because, as I just mentioned, they integrate them really well as part of the world. It helps increase exploration within the room of the puzzle and forces you to check everywhere that the area has to offer to help potentially aid you in completing the puzzle. I believe this is one of the few things that Paper Mario the Origami King has really excelled on. One of the things that is available to Mario's disposal is the usage of confetti. I believe that the concept of confetti has been inspired heavily from the previous entry in the series, Colour Splash, where you need to bring colour back to the canvas. Like Colour Splash, confetti is an important feature in the Origami King, whether this is simple exploration to find hidden stuff, to wanting to fill all the holes scattered across the game, to help aid you towards 100%, or to help you progress through the story. An example of this is when you immediately introduce the confetti at the start of the game, when you have to rescue Olivia by pulling her out of the ground. When you attempt to reach her, you will notice that there is a huge gap between the both of you, preventing you from saving her. Olivia will give you an empty confetti bag that she thinks will aid you. The only way to fill the bag is by hitting the nearby trees and flowers to help give you paper. You will then begin to notice your confetti bag filling up as you collect this paper. Once it's full, you can then empty out your confetti bag to fill the huge hole blocking you from Olivia. Continuing with our example in the Whispering Woods, I thought it'd be a good time to mention and discuss about the 1000 Fold Arms, which I personally think is a nice addition and adds something fresh to the table. Being able to manipulate the world to explore and find hidden discoveries is one of my favourite things to do in video games. Plus, the use of motion controls to help you interact with the world almost makes you feel like you are part of the world during that moment in time. I will admit and say I like how they used motion controls in this this title. Another thing that I like is collectible trophies. They're really a collector's dream if you're into that sort of thing. It's always worth exploring every tear that the game provides because you never know what you may discover. Coins. Coins are just simply used really to help you progress on certain aspects of the story. You will have obviously other uses like extended the amount of time you have when you make your move during battle, but if you're like me though and you only really use them for important items that can help you continue the story, then expect to easily have like 20,000 coins just sitting there really doing absolutely nothing. I think it was important to leave the best till last. One of the few positives about the Origami King's battle system is that they have learned from the failures of Sticker Start and Colour Splash. To begin with, you now actually have default weapons that don't get used after every turn, your boots and hammer. You are still able to collect weapons as you travel through the game, but unlike before, where you can only use these for one turn and that's it, you now have a more sensible durability with the weapons, and you can use them on multiple turns before they eventually break. It isn't perfect, but it's a lot better compared to the previous two entries in the series. At the start, I did find the wave battles to be really creative, as it really makes you think about strategy and to identify quickly with the limited time that you have to what best method is to line up the enemies to increase damage with your attack. However, this is when the positives quickly turn into negatives, because at the start of the playthrough I thought the wave battles were really interesting and quite entertaining to do. Then an hour passed and I was already beginning to hate the battle system due to how complicated it can be to rotate and split all the enemies into rows, making it very frustrating in trying to identify how you're able to get all the enemies together in a line or in multiple lines. It was just very frustrating for me. And while I don't enjoy the battle system for your typical Goomba or Shy Guy, I have to admit and say that for the boss battles, they are really creatively done in comparison. In terms of design, I love how each boss battle is a piece of stationery, whether it's a pencil and a set or it's some rubber bands banded together. The way that they have designed these boss battles is really creative, and I've used these pieces of stationery effectively in terms of design, and the attacks that the bosses have been very creatively done. With the boss battle system though itself, I have complete opposite feelings to what I have when you battle with your regular enemy. At first, I really hated it because I kept forgetting that Mario needs to start his movement with an arrow, and that kept annoying me at first and was making me really start to dislike fighting the bosses. Once my brain started kicking gear though, I suddenly realised how fun it is to be strategic with the boss battles, whether it's to set an effective path that will let Mario give a lot of damage to the boss, or trying to find a way to manoeuvre around the enemy's attack that is trying to disrupt your movement on the board. It's really fun once you get used to it, and I honestly feel you should prioritise on the boss battles instead of the regular ones if you want to try and get the most enjoyment out of the battle system. Paper Mario has always been a series where I see some of the fanbase not like the recent entries for a particular reason, and that's okay because I can understand the frustration to a degree with how limited of which is out of their hands. Intelligent Systems can produce their games to similar quality of the original N64 and GameCube titles, but people need to see that the Origami King is actually a fun, action-packed, entertaining game that has been stapled together into a wonderful package. I've really had a fun time and enjoyed nearly every minute. Paper Mario the Origami King lacks a concrete story after the introduction. It has some elements of brilliance throughout, but nothing consistent like the very start. It needs to resort mainly on exploration to keep you hooked. This is okay for games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, but it doesn't really fit the more RPG routes that some fans wanted. Overall, in my honest opinion, I will give Paper Mario the Origami King 8 toads out of 10. This game may have not reached the standard of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door for everyone, but from my experience playing through the Origami King, it definitely has begun to be folded back into shape and returned back to the style of the original installments in the Paper Mario series.